The notion that the places we love might not be in our lives forever isn't something that people tend to recognize until those places are already gone. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I learned this when I was very little. Now, my dad grew up on a farm just out west of Toronto, and for as long as I can remember, he has loved to regale me and my sister with stories of that place. That's the farmhouse, and on the left are pictures up there of the barn. Clearly, to me, when I was little, the farm and its buildings, its neighbors and its animals were foundational building blocks of my dad's childhood. Eventually, however, his parents, my grandparents, decided to leave the farm, move back into the city, and leave their rural lifestyle behind. Now, despite the fact that my dad has lived the rest of his life in the city, the farm and his memories of it were always held close in his memory. Eventually, there came a time when he wanted to introduce me to this place which was such an important part of his life. When that day came, it was mostly by accident. We were on our way back home after a road trip and just happened to be driving not too far from the farm. So without telling me where we were going, he pulled the car off the highway and into the countryside. It was a shock to my dad when these buildings weren't what we saw when we pulled over to the side of the road, but this. Unbeknownst to my dad, about a year before we visited, the new owners of the farm demolished the old barn and house and sold the property. All that was left of my dad's childhood home was this field. And the only evidence of that home was a dirt driveway leading to nowhere. Clearly, this wasn't the reunion with his childhood home that my dad had expected. Of course he understood that this hadn't been his home for decades, and that his old cats wouldn't be playing in the yard, and that his old neighbors were probably gone as well. But on some level, he had still expected for the bones of this place to be the same as his home that was once such an important part of his life. And they weren't. So we got back into the car, and life went on. Obviously, this moment was probably heart-wrenching for my dad. I knew this place meant a lot to him, and I can't imagine how this moment would have felt. Because generally, places do mean so much to us, mere places. Places are such characters in our lives. They've each got their own identities, their stories, their quirks, and their charms. And throughout life, we really grow to love them. So what does it mean then, if places are such an important part of our lives? Well, the love we feel for places is so strong and so noteworthy that it's actually been given its own word, topophilia, love of or emotional connection to a particular place or physical environment. So, what does it mean then? If places are such important parts of our lives, if we even have a specific word for the love we feel for these things, what does it mean to lose them? What does it mean for my dad to return to his farm and find it demolished? What's that feeling? Because while we have a word for the feeling of love for a place, we don't have a word for what it feels like to lose one. Which is odd. As philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein pointed out way back in 1921, the limits of our language are the limits of our world. If we don't have the vocabulary to articulate what the loss of a place feels like, we won't be able to understand it. So, today, I'd like to propose some vocabulary that we can use to both articulate how this experience feels, as well as to understand it. And that vocabulary is the vocabulary of death. So if we can frame the relationship formed between a person and a place as that place's life, the end of that relationship, whether prompted by a place's renovation or demolishment or sale, is that place's death to that person. And suddenly, the loss of a place isn't just the loss of a place, but the death of a place. And the pain we feel from that loss isn't just pain, but grief. And by naming this emotion as grief, we give those feeling it a framework and an ability to express how they're feeling and work through those feelings. And I can understand that this may seem like a bit of a stretch. After all, places aren't people. A building getting demolished is not the same thing as a person dying. But sometimes it doesn't feel like that. In a 2010 paper, human geographers Lila Scannell and Robert Gifford found that in the case of refugees, when they're forced to leave their homes and neighborhoods behind, when they lose their places, they do actually experience a grieving process for those places, similar to the grieving process experienced after loved ones are lost. So this isn't just some over-dramatization of an unimportant phenomenon, but there is some psychological basis for this framing. The loss of a place can feel, at some level, comparable to the loss of a loved one. And so we should give that loss at least some amount of emotional weight and dignity in the way we discuss it. But even beyond that, I'm sure there are those of you in the audience who may be thinking, "Nah, I haven't lost a place. I don't see why this framing is at all useful for me." I want you to think about something else, because depending on your age and your life experience, you may not have actually lost a place yet. So I want to ask you, what are the places that are the most meaningful to you right now? What places do you love? Because I really want you to walk away from this talk with a newfound awareness of the lives of those places. Maybe it's your home, your bedroom, your grandparents' dining room, your friend's basement, your classroom, or your neighborhood. I would really like you to be cognizant of these places and your relationships with them. Because as I learned, standing in the field of my dad's demolished barn, they aren't permanent. My childhood home may not always be my childhood home. Your favorite bookstore might one day be a Starbucks. And I'm sorry, because recognizing that something we love isn't permanent feels bad and scary. But it's better to recognize that now than when you're standing in that place. When we're greeted with the sentiment or the idea that the people we love have lifespans, that they can die, the idea that we ultimately reach is, oh, I have to make the most of the time that I do have with my loved ones because that time is finite. Doing this, framing places as things with lifespans, should do the same thing. The idea that I want to leave you with is the idea that you don't just have to make the most of the time that you have with the people you love, but with the places you love too, because they don't last forever. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.